You're watching Screen Junkies Central. Today's episode is brought to you by T-Mobile, the Uncarrier. This is Screen Junkies Movie Fights.
Yes! Welcome to San Diego, live from Screen Junkies Central. Live long and prosper. This is going to be so amazing. I'm Andy Signo, host of Movie Fights. I'm here with the lovely Alicia Malone, who's going to be fact-checking this Star Trek edition.
This is amazing. I know Dan Murrell is backstage and he is freaking out right now.
Freaking out.
Yes, we have some great guests, and of course you can watch this live on Facebook, on YouTube, on SJ Plus, and for all our programming, go to screenjunkies.com/central.
We're here live in San Diego, and I'm honored to do this. I'm so happy. We're going to get right to it. We're going to ask some of the toughest questions, Star Trek questions there are, with some of the best experts we could get. I'm so happy they made the time to be here. We also have some surprises in store that you're going to see. So this is a fun show, so get excited.
Yeah.
But what do you say? Shall we get to it? Who loves Star Trek? Yes? Have you guys seen Star Trek Beyond yet? It's pretty fun. We got to see the premiere. It's pretty fun. 50 years of Star Trek. What an honor. Let's do this. First up, you know him. He's the champion of this show, Movie Fights. Screen Junkies' biggest Star Trek fan, Mr. Dan Murrell. Boom. High five. That's allowed, right? That's not blasphemy. Next up, I'm honored to have this guy. He's a friend of, he came in to help us, a friend of Scott Mann's. I'm so happy. He's the writer and producer of the cult classic Free Enterprise and the author of the 50-Year Mission. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Altman.
Woo! Welcome.
Great. And finally, this guy has written for Star Trek Voyager, Enterprise, The Next Generation, and a movie called First Contact, as well as Generations. Guys, it's Brandon Braga!
Woo! Welcome.
I think, Dan, these guys have literally written a book on Star Trek. You're in trouble.
I'm in big trouble.
Guys, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
Great, you have mics. Awesome.
Glad to be here.
I'm told you've seen the shows. I'm excited. This is a debate show, so have fun with this.
Very
as I told you
scholarly,
backstage.
right? I understand
Exactly.
it's very professorial.
Yes, and what's different about this show, unlike most shows, is we didn't get to prepare this. You guys are legit Trekkies, so what we have is these are blind Star Trek fights, because some of these fights are tough. People have their favorites, but we're going to be asking best captain, best movie, and all these things, and you're going to have. It's based on your order, which will be random. Which if we don't have our numbers, we should make those now, because I'm going to pull. Can you rip those for me?
Yes.
You're going to be based on the order of we draw a number, and then you'll get to go first. So you have a slight advantage potentially, depending on how you see it. But the audience won't know if it's your favorite you're arguing. But you got to commit to whatever you end up choosing. Any questions?
No.
No.
Oh, I love this, Dan. How crazy is
This
this?
is insane. I'm arguing Star Trek things with a guy who literally wrote the book on Star Trek and a guy who wrote some of my favorite episodes of Star Trek of all time. So, and movies. It's
Don't
I'm
get your
nervous.
hopes up.
I'm nervous.
You're nervous. All right, quick rule reminder: scoring's based on facts, passion, and creativity. And I may be using the audience. You guys have some voting panels, I believe, too. I may be coming to you to help me do this. And I think they're watching live, right?
Yeah, people are watching live, and I'm going to be watching out for the tweets. So if you're watching at home, or even if you're in the audience, you can tweet and use the hashtag MovieFightsLive, and I'll try and read out as much as I can. And I'm looking for some great tweets and some help on choosing the winner. And we also want to thank our great sponsor, too.
Yes. I want to thank T-Mobile, one of our presenting sponsors here. With double the LTE coverage, you can follow the fights in more places. So thank you for the help to bring here Screen Junkies Central. So thank you so much, T-Mobile. All right, shall we do this?
No,
We did it.
no
The
Chico's
rough
bail
numbers.
bonds?
No cheating. All right.
Very scientific.
Very scientific. This will
way
determine
to
the
do it.
order of this first fight.
All right.
And the first fight. Sorry, do we have a video before or after?
We do well, yeah, Andy. We can ask if you want. We can ask the question, and then while that video is playing, we can figure it out because we got some special guests to weigh in on this question.
We got some very special guests to answer the first question that we'll be fighting today. Best Star Trek movie. Let's hear from some Trek people themselves and see what they thought.
Who we got?
All right.
All right, Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto from Star Trek Beyond. We have a show every week called Movie Fights. It's where real fans every week get into movie debates.
Nice.
But
the important shit in the world.
So important. It's super fun. But I want to know your opinion on all these Star Trek questions.
Okay.
It's all in good fun.
Great.
The first
We'll
one,
see about that.
other than the movies that you're in, what do you think the best Star Trek movie is?
I'm probably going to go for the obvious one and say Wrath of Khan.
You know, the Wrath of Khan.
Wrath of Khan.
Wrath of Khan.
Wrath of Khan.
The Wrath of Khan.
Star Trek, the motion picture.
Okay.
You have Kirk coming back. He's rusty. He's out of the chair. He has this incredible conflict with Deckard. Bones calls him on that. And then you also got Spock coming back and joining the mission, but after failing to achieve Kolinahr, he has an agenda, a personal agenda, which is against the mission, which is to, engage with this mysterious life form. The bald girl.
Oh yeah,
Ilea and her relationship with Deckard. What I love about it is that the villain of the piece is this sort of vast Vija sort of omnipresent being, which is destroying and cannibalizing worlds and spaceships as it goes. Actually turns out to be a man-made object, Voyager, and so
it's very Roddenberry.
It's very Roddenberry.
Okay.
Man,
I love that Carl Urban could talk for 90 seconds straight about Star Trek the Motion Picture. That's a guy that knows his stuff.
he does.
Kolinahr, he broke out. That's amazing.
All right, well, Mark, you picked first. So
Okay.
you're number one. Let's tell, what's the best Star Trek movie?
Well, I was going to go with Carl for a second and pick Star Trek the Motion Picture, but then I realized I'm really competitive and I want to win. So I decided I'll go with Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
All right, give me just a little spiel. Why is that the best?
Well, look, anyone who's a big Fantasy Island fan can tell you, wait, no, that's probably not the best argument for Ricardo. But, Star Trek II is like the greatest episode of the original series in a sense. Even though it doesn't have necessarily the scope of Star Trek the Motion Picture, what it has is great character moments. It's the first time that you deal with the characters are actually aging. Kirk is dealing with his own mortality. He's dealing with the fact that he has an illegitimate son. That kind of happens when you screw around with every woman in the universe. So I think to his credit, Nick Meyer said, we're going to deal with the repercussions of unprotected sex in the 23rd century. That's a great thing, great cautionary tale. But I think that, ultimately, certainly the battle in the Mutara Nebula is one of the great space battles of all time. It's not just a bunch of things. It's not a bunch of insects attacking the Enterprise and destroying it in 30 seconds and Captain Kirk being stranded on a planet for 3 hours. No, it's actually, Kirk, in a cat and mouse game with the Reliant, which is fantastic. And it's a great cast. Ricardo Montalban's great, but so is Paul Winfield as Captain Terrell. So I just think that, and of course, who can deny the power of the denouement? Spoiler alert, when Spock dies at the end of the movie, anyone who saw that movie in 1982, had an attachment to these characters, was in tears. Because you didn't know Spock was going to be back 3 years later in Star Trek 3. You thought this was it for Leonard. So it is moving, it is powerful, it is exciting, it's a roller coaster ride, and it's heartfelt, and it's by far the best Star Trek motion picture.
All right, good opening marks. Dan, First Contact. Oh, sorry, you're...
Yeah. I got the second pick, and I chose, and I love the original series. That's what got me into Star Trek. But the one that was on that I grew up with was The Next Generation. So I'm a TNGer at heart, and the movie that I loved when it came out, and I still go back to, is Star Trek First Contact. I love First Contact.
Suck up.
This is very intimidating to talk about with Brandon here, but I will attempt to talk and not seem like a suck up. But no, First Contact I love because it really paid off. I love what they did with Generations and bridging the gap. But what I love with First Contact was that it really was that bridge between the series and the movies, and that you had this underlying theme of Picard and the Borg and the damage that the Borg did to him. And I love the fact that you had the Borg, which are an awesome villain, like TNG's signature villain. I love that you had the Borg in a movie. It's got great action, which you don't see in all of the Star Trek movies. You see it in some of them. The newer ones are a little more action-packed, I think, than the older ones. But you have great action, but you also have the story of humanity, the time travel aspect, which is a great hallmark in any great Star Trek film, is time travel. You get to see that moment of First Contact, and I love the reveal that First Contact was with the Vulcans. And that is such a seminal moment in Star Trek history, and you get to see that. You get to see the whole hero worship with Zefram Cochrane, and that he is a flawed person. And I just love what it has to say about Picard paying off the relationship with the Borg. It's got great action, has a lot to say about humanity and about what a Star Trek, what that actually means. And I love that movie.
I don't know about
so
the
much.
audience, but I think you've convinced Brannon. I think he is now convinced.
All right, Brannon, who wrote First Contact.
I wrote First Contact, and I'm telling you, you're wrong.
What's your pick?
But you made it sound. You make it sound like an amazing movie. Perhaps it's because it's the first Star Trek movie. Actually, the first one I saw was Khan, but the first Star Trek movie that really got me excited about Star Trek personally was The Voyage Home. And I remember where I saw it, at what theater I saw it. I remember the crowd's reaction to every moment. And I haven't seen a Star Trek movie that had that audience reaction. And I think it was the humor. I don't think those characters had ever been more human than in that movie and more relatable. These actors, even though they were, by the way, first movie, or Wrath of Khan, we're so old. They weren't that old. They were like, when their 40s? Yeah. That's not that old. Facing mortality at 44? Don't buy it. And Mutara Nebula, the ships don't even do anything. He's like, Khan's quoting Shakespeare, then you cut over to Kirk, and it, by the way, looked good. And I think that Voyage Home had one of the best concepts driving any Star Trek story. The idea that an alien craft, a kind of terrifying monolithic craft, comes and starts to destroy the Earth for reasons we cannot understand until we...
Well, we could have. Dawn Steele, who was the executive at Paramount at the time, wanted to subtitle The Probe because she thought no one could understand what it was doing. So she was telling Harv Bennett and Leonard Nimoy that they had to subtitle The Probe when it was going, wah, 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 like, and of course they fought that, and thank God they never subtitled it.
You're making my argument.
Okay, I got 2 words for you. John Shuck as a Klingon. I mean, as bad as Christopher Lloyd was as Kruge in Star Trek 3, John Shuck, come on. Holmes and Yo-Yo, they're too young for this.
I didn't know that show. That I liked him as the Klingon. But
there can be no peace
the
as long as Kirk lives.
That these aliens have come to contact a different form of life that lives in the sea, that had gone extinct, is still a powerful idea. It's so simple, it's so clean. The movie is fun from beginning to end. Granted, there's that terrible scene with Catherine Hicks slapping that guy. That was not a good scene. You remember that? Yes. That was very stilted. But to this day, I may have picked third, but this is my first choice.
I think rebuttals. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love all. These are all great movies. These are all great Star Trek movies. Maybe the 3 best Star Trek movies. I think personally. I think that
Not Star Trek 5? Come on,
not
Dan.
Star Trek 5.
Show some chutzpah.
What does God name the starship? I think that I think Wrath of Khan has the great personal story going on between Kirk and Khan, which is awesome. And I think that Star Trek 4 has the humor and the great interpersonal. Like Star Trek 4 is my favorite character movie of all the especially with the original crew, and that you get such great interaction between all the characters. I think that First Contact has all of those aspects and combined in one movie, plus great action, which I think the only knock on Wrath of Khan is that the space battle is not that dynamic, and I think it's because, it was 82 and you didn't have the kind of special effects that you do now. I think with the battle with the Borg, you have that personal connection. You have, Captain Picard, that great speech, the line was speech on here. That's so awesome, and I just love that you're paying off that relationship in a movie. But I also think that you do have the dynamics between the characters also, and you have Data being tempted by humanity, and you're paying off so many of these storylines from these characters over 7 years of television and 1 previous movie. And to get that all in one movie and to have it be satisfying, and it's a crowd pleaser. It's as satisfying on an action level as any blockbuster movie would be, and to do that in a Trek movie I think is really difficult, and to have all of those elements present, I think that's very difficult to do.
Mark, thoughts?
Well, I'll tell you, First Contact's not the best Star Trek movie for one reason. Picard is not John McClane. Okay, Patrick thinks he's John McClane, but Picard is not John McClane and didn't belong on and the way they originally wrote the script was Riker was on the Enterprise and Picard was on the planet with Zefram Cochrane, which is the way it should have been. But Patrick wanted to fight and bleep, and so, of course, he became the badass,
Yes.
which is not true to what the show was. Now, First Contact's a great movie, and it's a textbook for people who are making Star Trek movies now that they could learn a lot from. But as far as Star Trek 4 is concerned, I would negate Brandon's argument by saying time travel is not about papier-mâché heads. Anyone who's seen Star Trek 4, all of a sudden Leonard Nimoy thinks he's Tarkovsky, and it becomes this surreal, weird thing with papier-mâché heads, and the Enterprise is suddenly thrust back in time. Okay, that cannot be the greatest Star Trek movie of all time. Plus, it has that dreadful Leonard Rosenman score, which is the worst score to a Star Trek movie of any of the films, and that's worse than Dennis McCarthy's score for Generations. So it's pretty bad. But
Ouch.
Ooh, I know, right? But so I think that as great as Voyage Home is, with its ecological green message before it was in vogue, and it's the only film that doesn't have a black hat villain or a Khan character ripping off Khan, which is typical of almost every Star Trek movie. It's a great movie, but it's not as good as Khan. The tragedy of this character who was stranded and left on SETI Alpha 5 and seeks revenge. It's a Shakespearean drama. So when Brandon says he's quoting Shakespeare, of course he's quoting Shakespeare. This is textbook
Nick
Shakespeare.
Meyer should have given Shakespeare a co-writing credit. I mean, he doesn't.
Well, for Star Trek 6.
Yeah, well, yeah, even more so.
Brandon, other thoughts before we make a vote here?
I mean, this is about a personal favorite. I really enjoyed Khan when I saw it, but as someone who was not a regular viewer of the series, I thought it was cool, but I didn't really understand what was going on between Picard and Kirk. Voyage Home to me is more accessible. I agree that First Contact with the kind of like the Vulcan nativity, Three Wise Men nativity scene was a good way to bring in new people. I think one of the reasons these J.J. Abrams pictures are so appealing is because they are just a little bit broader. And I having written a couple of the movies, one good, one not good, I think the TV show is one thing, but the movies should have a broader appeal. That's my opinion. That's what this is about, and I think Voyage Home has that.
Wow, all right.
Woo!
This is tough.
Yeah, this
This is
really
tough. That's three smart people who know this material.
I know, it's also really hard to fact check because they all know their facts.
Oh, yeah, they know their facts. Anything happening there before I go? I'm going to go to you guys to help me here.
Yes, a lot of people on Twitter. Zen Out says, movie fights live Star Trek is a dream come true. And I also love from Variety Film says, so awesome to see Murrell Dan nervous. The king of movie fights live, showing his human side.
Yes.
All right.
We also did a poll, but I won't spoil it.
We did a poll.
till
I'm trying to
after.
do it because I'm trying to. I want you guys to help me here because this is too tough. I know I'm the judge. I'm supposed to, but I have a whole audience that's listening. I'm trying to figure out how to have you guys vote for 3. Can I have the lights on the? You have your cards, right?
About front,
You
back,
lower.
and
Can I
then,
see
like,
some lights on the crowd so I can help them? There we go. What I'm going to do, I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work, I have another method. If you'd like to vote for Dan, raise one hand flat out. Raise your hand up. One hand if you want Dan. If you want to vote for
4
Mark,
people.
vote the black side of your panel. Lights, please. House lights. And if you want to vote for Brandon, the
Lots of
white
black.
side of your panel. Can I see the lights? Hands up for Dan, black for Mark, and white for Brandon. I need the lights. Keep them up. Do they stay
I
up?
think it's the white.
It
Yeah.
looks white to me.
Looks like the white has it.
Wow. Yeah.
Right on. Thank you.
That is
Yes.
so
You agree?
disappointing.
like-
That is
okay.
so wrong.
Hands are very difficult
That
to
is
see.
so
in retrospect.
wrong.
Hands are very difficult to see with cards. But there were like 7 hands, so I surrender.
A comedy episode of Star Trek can never be the best episode. That's why Trouble with Tribbles can never be the best Star Trek episode. That is why Fistful of Datas can't be the best Next Generation episode.
He
And
talked about a
Star
lot
Trek
of things,
4
though.
can't be the best movie because Star Trek is ultimately not a
Accessibility
comedy.
It's
is
not a
good
comedy movie.
argument.
It's
I
not a
love it.
comedy.
They're already still fighting. This is a
Yeah.
great show.
I
For
love
the
it.
record, the Twitter poll
The voters
voted
have
yours
spoken,
last.
Mark.
My prediction for the fight, No pain.
Mark, you won the Twitter poll.
Yes.
Thank you, Twitter.
We did the
Obviously, those tweetettes are a lot more knowledgeable about Star Trek.
All right, we have a round 2, and I think we have another video from some special guests to help set this up.
We do.
The fight this one we'll be doing is, what's the best Star Trek alien species ever? Let's see what the cast of Star Trek Beyond thought.
The coolest Star Trek alien species ever.
Wow, now there's a...
Wow.
All time, what do you think is the coolest alien species that we've seen on Star Trek?
Jayla, whatever she is.
Yeah, Jayla's pretty
Did
rad.
they even say what she is? No.
I kind of like the Andorians. I like their funny little antenna, their blue faces, their white haircuts.
The Borg.
Oh, the Borg.
You know, until the Borg came on Next Generation, you know, the series was okay, but they defined it. That was the threat that I remember as a kid watching that show freaked me out.
And I like the Borg as well because they almost are like the other side of the Federation coin. You know, they're also moving through the galaxy, assimilating worlds, but in a far darker, less productive way. I might have to, bin the Andorians and agree with Carl on that one.
I keep thinking of Cobra Maneuver, and I haven't seen that episode since I was like probably 16.
Yeah.
But that alien, I remember seeing as a kid, like, they're just playing mind games.
Yes.
Like, I remember when I was 8, I didn't understand except the fact that they had huge heads, you know.
Yes.
But then later on, I'm like, oh, he's screwing with, so my level of engagement kept kind of evolving, but that's always kind of stayed with me. So I don't know what they're called, but I
The
would.
scary ones for me, because it was always in the end credits.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Some
That was
scary
fun.
looking aliens there, but I just love watching Dan's face when you're talking to the stars of Star Trek Beyond about this stuff.
Yeah, I've been terrified this entire week. They sent me
Yeah.
to talk to the cast of Star Trek Beyond, and then I have to fight these guys.
Hey,
so.
Mark, did you see Star Trek Beyond?
I did see Star Trek Beyond.
What'd you think? I haven't seen it yet.
You know, a lot of people in this room haven't seen it yet, so I think I'm not going to talk
Oh,
about it.
good point.
There you go.
Yeah, no spoilers. All right, so we just pulled numbers. We know who's going first. Brandon, you got first pick. That's fair. Best Star Trek alien species ever.
Whoever wins the round should have the first pick of the next round.
You won, apparently. And you have
Do you want to do it that
So
way?
my
No, we want to know who goes second.
Vulcans.
Vulcans.
And it's, to me, it's a no-brainer. Spock and the concept of the Vulcans would lay the DNA of every Star Trek type character to come after it, which is a character struggling with an internal dichotomy, a character battling, in his case, with his emotions and his logic. If you think about the characters that follow, Worf, half Klingon, half human, 7 of 9, half Borg, half human. This was the primordial character that Gene Roddenberry created that would inform Star Trek for 50 years. It was an enduring species. They survived every series, had a Vulcan in it. Not Deep Space Nine did not, correct? Not a regular.
Not as serious.
But the others had regular Vulcan characters. And I just think that if you look at the dramatic mileage that the characters have had, I mean, I know Kirk is the captain, but I think if you had to pick one character to put on a poster of Star Trek, it would be Spock.
Shatner would disagree.
Shatner would disagree.
Yes, definitely
He
true.
would vehemently
Contractually.
disagree.
All right, Dan, you pick next. Best alien species.
So many, and I had a few that were going through my head, and I went with I had to agree with Urban and Carl Urban and Simon Pegg. The Borg are just. The Borg came at the time in Star Trek when the Vulcans and the Romulans and the Klingons are great. They're Trek hallmarks. They've been in every series. They're always the bad guys. There's so many Romulan ships out. They run into so many for somebody that's supposed to be in the neutral zone. There's so many Romulan ships just hanging out in space. And I feel like that Trek was also kind of, the Next Generation was looking for its next big, their signature alien. And the Borg are so unlike any other species because, all the different species on Star Trek kind of have their own different characteristics. But what it usually comes down to is diplomacy, or they got to talk to this guy, or talk to this Vulcan, or this Romulan's got a heart, or this Klingon, like Worf has got honor. The Borg are so cool because they're just so unique. There's no negotiation with them. There's no tactics to be taken with them. They're unstoppable. You can't fight them. You try to speak with them, and all they say is you will be assimilated. And in a weird way, what I like the most about the Borg and why I think they're kind of cool is if you twist your brain around a little bit, it kind of makes sense because they're about efficiency and they're not necessarily sinister. They're just like, no, listen, we're just trying to make things the most efficient they could possibly be, and that just means we're going to assimilate you, and everybody's part of one collective, and, it's much more efficient that way. Even though they do terrible things in service of that, I love that you can kind of twist your head around and go like, what, it's not that bad, but they also look cool. I love that it requires. I love when the Enterprise. My favorite time that the Enterprise ever has to do something is when they face a foe that they don't know how to beat, and it requires some creative thinking. And the Borg are always that enemy. It's always the enemy that no conventional way will ever work to beat them. We have to think outside the box, and I love when they bring that kind of into creative thinking into Star Trek.
All right, Mark, you're number 3. What's your pick?
Well, hearing the Vulcans and the Borg, made me think. There's so many great Star Trek aliens, The fact that nobody picked the Klingons was astonishing. But then I was at a convention once, and some Klingon wouldn't let me in the room with his bat'let, and I was like, I'm sort of over the Klingons after that. It's taking his part way too seriously. The Romulans, ever since the original series, sort of let me down. Never been great. There are a couple of great episodes in Next Generation, like The Defector with the Romulans, but they never lived up to their billing. I mean, Nero and the new movies, not so great. Then I look at the Bynars. They were pretty cool. The Baku, not so great. The Gorn were awesome. The big lizard guy, Ted, and the Hirogen, they were cool. So species 8572 or whatever they were called.
84, fact check.
Yeah. But so I really had to think about it. And this is what I came up with. You remember the silicon rock creature from the Savage Curtain? And if you touched him, you burn. You burn. Okay, now to me, he's the greatest alien of all time because this rock guy turned his whole methane planet into a Class M planet, right? And then he creates Abraham Lincoln and Surak and gets them to fight the greatest evil in humanity's history. So he had Colonel Green, Attila the Hun, Donald Trump. It was amazing. And they fought to the death. And you think the Savage Curtain, that's a pretty silly, stupid episode. But that's a really cool alien. And it was also when the original Star Trek was really audacious, it wasn't just a guy in a bumpy forehead. It was this rock creature with 9 eyes. And if you touched it, it seared your skin. So I want to think outside the box. I could have gone with the Klingons and I probably would have won. But I want to be daring. I want to live on the edge. And I decided to go with the silicon rock creature from the Savage Curtain.
What do you guys think of his on the edge pick?
I'm one of those that thinks that was one of the silly. That was one where I think that they didn't have any money, and they were like, what costumes do we have? They're like, I have Lincoln and a couple of Vulcaneers and a Genghis Khan outfit, and they're like, get them in front of the cameras in 5 minutes. We have to go.
You misunderstood because I really meant the Melkotians from Spectre of the Gun. No.
I mean, it's certainly... that's the goofy side of Trek, which I get it's got the camp value, but, if we're talking coolest...
Dan, you're just young.
You
just don't appreciate the genius.
But the
question
was species, which I think insinuates more than just a one alien appearance.
There are a whole bunch of styrofoam rocks on that planet. So I'm sure there were a lot of these rock creatures we just couldn't see. This was because it started as a rock and it turned into the guy. So and then he made he wanted to test good versus evil. It gets to the very heart of the moral drama of Star Trek, where we literally are seeing good, which is stronger, good versus evil, and evil runs from good. Okay, fundamental message, a tenet of Star Trek. I'm having a real tough time selling this.
Look, the Borg. I love the Borg. I wrote a lot of episodes with Borg in Voyager, and I wrote First Contact, and the reason I disagree with you is that they're villains, but they're a deeply flawed concept. They're cool, the idea of the collective and how threatening that might be to a free society and a free thinking society. They're zombies. They're really boring when you think about it. And the first challenge we had in First Contact before we invented the Borg Queen was that we couldn't do 2 hours of a movie with these guys just chasing people around. Star Trek species need a voice. And I go back to the Vulcans of having the original kind of Star Trek voice. The collective, the Queen came later, and I just don't think they're as nuanced a species. They're more frightening. By the way, there were Vulcan villains too throughout the years, so they could be both. But I just don't think they're as nuanced. And then
Lawrence Luckett
I think
villain,
you
Star
need to
Trek
get
V.
You need to get back in the box.
You know,
Well,
can
writer of the Borg,
Dan.
let me tell you why you're so
Writer
wrong
of the
about the
Borg.
Borg. Guy who wrote the Borg. This is fun. Okay. No, here's why I think they're cool, is that the Vulcans, I like the Vulcans. They're logical. They're logical. They have no emotion. They're also logical, and they have no emotion. I love the Vulcans, but the Vulcans are always, it seems like, used as a bouncing board for other characters to bounce off of, or they lose control and they're not Vulcans anymore. When we're talking about best species, I think it's not only the species themselves, and I'll agree that if it was just Borg, if all you're talking about was just looking and listening to Borg, then you will be assimilated. I would agree that if that was all that there was. But I think what makes them the best species is not just themselves, but what the change that they brought, because Star Trek had gotten to a point where everything was kind of expected and they knew how to beat everybody, they knew the relations for everybody. And what the Borg brought in was this foe that they were able to stretch out across different series and seasons of just like, every time you'd beat them, they get better, and they come back at you. And you'd beat them, and it's like, okay, we're done with the Borg. And they come back at you, and they get even better, and they get even better. If you beat them in their time, they're going to time travel back and try to get you back in the past. And that's what I like. That's what I think makes them so cool and so unique in Star Trek, is that they can't be beaten by conventional means, and they evolve. And that's their only purpose, is to evolve. And I think that's so cool.
Do you know the Borg were originally supposed to be an insect race, but they couldn't afford to do it? And the Borg sort of came out of, in late 80s, the cyberpunk movement. And Maurice Hurley created it for Q Who, which is still one of the best Borg episodes.
It's a great
and it doesn't
episode.
get much love because, obviously, Best of Both Worlds is sort of the one that everybody talks about. But I agree with Brannon. I think the Borg are a great villain. I think they've been used phenomenally well. But, then you have episodes like Borg, where it's like, oh, I'm not happy being a Borg, and it gets so, touchy-feely.
Don't talk about Hugh like that.
I think it just, I think the Borg haven't had the impact, and as Brandon said, as the Vulcans have through all the shows. I mean, if you look at what they did in Enterprise, one of the most, I think, cleverest things they did with that show was to sort of make the Vulcans the villain, that they were holding humanity back. And that was really interesting because that was not something that we would have expected, knowing Spock and knowing the original series. But that said, that silicon rock creature in the Savage Curtain, that was the shit.
Sides.
Yeah. I think it's 2-on-1.
Yeah, Brandon, last thoughts. To rebut
I
Dan
can't
with
get
cancer.
behind it. I can't get behind the rock creature. I mean, I know I'm right about this.
All right.
So sad.
I think all right. I think we got it. That was fun. I think it did really come down to Dan and Brownon. Sorry,
What did
Mark.
Twitter say?
Yeah. So we did run a poll on Twitter. 51% went to Vulcans, then 35% Borg, and 14% to Silicon Rock Monster.
I take back everything I said about the Twitter.
If you give it, you go. But let's see what the audience thought. All right, can we see the lights again? Sorry, Mark, I'm not even going to have the hands for you this time.
That
White
just
for
hurts.
Dan, black for Brennan. I need the lights. Wow, that's pretty even.
Woo!
Ooh.
I see a lot of black.
So let's give it to the silicon rock creature.
Hold on, keep it up. One, two. Alicia, what do you think? I got a gut. I don't want to say it out loud. You tell me yours, and if it matches mine, they win.
I think it's the black.
That's what I see too. So wait, who was that?
Black has it.
Whoa, we got it
The
again.
Vulcans. The Vulcans.
Wow, Brandon's good at this game.
That means you are 2 all.
Oh, guys,
Two to
gotta
zero.
step this up.
Thanks for those who agreed. Thank you.
I have
I'm
to
never
say-
going on The Price is Right.
During that, I was Googling things I never thought I ever would, like
Yes.
the Borg insect, what is silicon, rock monster.
What is silicone? Yeah, careful.
I love that I'm just like, no, listen, the Borg are interesting. Guy who had to write and make them interesting for years and
that
years.
was a tough battle, Dan.
You're wrong about the Borg, creator, sir.
So far, the audience picked everyone I would have picked. Let's go to round 3, guys. Here we go. This is a doozy. Best Star Trek captain. And we have some fans who are going to talk about it right now.
Best Star Trek captain of all time.
Picard.
You know, when I went off to college, I remember Next Generation came on. I was always kind of blown away, going, wow, the quality. But there's something about me that's part of the original. You know, it has to be Captain Kirk.
Captain Kirk.
Yeah.
Best captain?
Yes.
Oh, you know what? Now, I got a lot of love for Jean-Luc Picard.
Picard, yeah. He's
Because
good.
I like the way he speaks like this. It's an amazing thing that he can do, make it so.
Engage.
It's all about speaking in a very, very sort of pronounced way, you see. But I gotta go with Kirk, just because he's the first. And as much as I love Jean-Luc Picard, I'm just a bit of a, old-fashioned boy, so.
I
You're a big
agree with Simon. but
Why are
no.
you talking like that? It's ridiculous.
Is Shatner's Kirk faux shizzo? Captain Kirk. Shatner's OG Kirk is just special beyond all measure. When he wrestles, he's just wrestling that kid, strangely, and he has the pants up to his waist, and he's doing his...
Didn't you have those? Didn't you win them at auction?
Yeah.
All
Love it.
right.
And I have to say, Lovely Dust on Twitter says, Simon and Carl give me life. It is so refreshing seeing actual passion and nerdiness for Star Trek in Hollywood. I
Yes.
agree. It's so fun to see that.
It is.
All right, guys, this is the battle of all battles. Brandon got the first pick, so you get your first choice. Who's the best Star Trek captain? And I'm curious who he's going to say. Best Star Trek captain.
Well, this is a tough one for me because I know some of these actors who played the captains, so I'm hesitate to come out publicly. And but I've written, I mean I don't keep. I'm sorry to keep playing the writing card, but I wrote for Picard, I wrote for Kirk, I wrote for Janeway, and I wrote for Captain Archer. I got to go Picard. And the reason is, okay, now I know I'm going to lose this one.
That was amazing. I can't tell if you are you happy or sad? I can't. Okay.
They're
A little
shocked.
bit of shock.
They're
Yeah,
so
all right. Let's hear why.
surprised.
Go
Captain,
ahead.
wait, okay, well, look. It may be that it's because it's the first captain I wrote for, so there may be a sentimental aspect to this, but I think the obvious pick is Kirk. But when I think about Star Trek here at its 50th anniversary, I think of Kirk as kind of the proto-captain. He was the first. He was, but really it wasn't until Gene Roddenberry created Picard that he evolved what a Star Trek captain could be into the modern captain that I think has really endured. I think Picard was a more fully realized character in some ways than Kirk was. I don't think there's been, and with all due respect to everybody involved with the creation of the character, other captains, no captain ever has come close to Picard since then. And who would I serve under? I'm going to serve under Picard. I just think he's got his. Am I allowed to cuss on this show?
Hells yeah.
He's got his shit together. Like he's a better leader to me. I feel safer with him. I liked his Enterprise better. It just felt like a more welcoming, comfortable place. So I'm going Picard.
So you like the Holiday Inn as well?
I
Forget the Four Seasons.
I wasn't talking about the furnishings. I was talking about the captain.
Gotcha.
All right, Dan, you picked second. Who are you picking?
James Tiberius Kirk. And here's why. I'll tell you why. Because it's best captain, and like I said, I'm a TNG at heart, and I love Captain Picard. But here's the thing about Captain Kirk was one of the appeals of the Next Generation was that by that time, 70, 80 years down the line, Starfleet was a little more evolved, And the ships were a little more evolved, and it was a less of a, you weren't at war with the Klingons anymore. It was a more peaceful time. It was more about exploration, and that's great. Captain Picard, it was kind of like managing a cruise ship a lot of the times. Here's what I like about Captain Kirk. It's space, the final frontier. And when you're talking about the original series, Captain Kirk's Enterprise, that was down and dirty exploration. Every week, you're getting caught in the Tholian web. You're introduced to the Klingons. You're introduced to the Romulans for the first time.
You're introduced to silicon rock
You're
creatures.
introduced to silicon rock creatures and hordas that go through walls and stuff. And I love the fact that the Enterprise was at an earlier time, and Captain Kirk didn't have the benefit of all the experience diplomatically with Romulans and Klingons that Captain Picard had. He was encountering these things for the first time, and he was literally flying by the seat of his pants. He didn't have a ship that had holodecks and like lounges and huge like 10-story arboretums and 10 forward lounge. Like that Enterprise was falling apart.
Well,
it was about to explode half the time, and he kept that thing going. That Enterprise should have been done in like 6 months, and I like to think that they completed that 5-year mission before the movies. He kept that thing out, investigating the unknown, exploring deep space. The first guy to see all these things, he kept that crew together, and he kept that ship together. I respect Picard. He was in a time of peace. He was a manager. Kirk was a leader.
Ooh, all right. I just want to fact check, because Captain Kirk did have the holodeck in the animated series. Okay? He did? Yes, the holodeck was invented in the Practical Joker episode of the animated series. And the fact that I know that is probably the most pathetic thing that I could
No offense, Alicia.
I
possibly know.
I bet it broke down in that
I did
episode,
write
didn't it?
2,000-page books about Star Trek that are on sale now. So,
Did the holodeck break down in that episode?
it did not. Yes, it did,
Yes,
actually.
what did I say? It's breaking down everything.
All right, well, you're
I
picking.
don't even know what to Google at this point.
What are you picking, Mark? Best captain.
Well, you know, I need clarification on Kirk. Are we talking about Fat Elvis or Young Elvis? Are we talking about the original series of the movie or a movie?
I'm
Kirk?
talking about TOS, season
TOS
1
Kirk.
through 3.
Damn, I thought I could
Shatner,
get that through. You know.
wrestling shirtless on the alien planet, Green
okay,
Girl
okay.
Kirk. Yeah.
Well, you know, this is really difficult for me because after all, I did make a movie. Free Enterprise's only purpose was to extol the genius of Captain James T. Kirk and William Shatner. So for me to take any other Star Trek captain is not logical, but I'll try. I was thinking about Captain Merrick from Bread and Circuses, you know, who turned the Roman planet into gladiatorial games, but he was a bit of a loser. Of course, there was Captain Will Decker, you know, but he was like a lunatic. And you know, rammed his shuttlecraft into the Doomsday Machine. Matt Decker, yeah, not Will Decker. Will Decker was the motion picture.
Yes.
Thank you. Then we took, you know, I was thinking about Captain Ron Tracy in the Omega Glory because, you know, it's sort of close to July 4th and, you know, una plebnista. Captain Spock, you know, Spock was a captain for about 12 seconds in Star Trek II, but he had no ego to bruise, so he went back to first officer. And then, of course, you know, my second favorite captain next to Captain Kirk was Captain Sisko, especially when he became, you know, Captain Badass Sisko after he shaved the hair and had the goatee. But I realized I really want to lose because Captain Kirk deserves to win. So I will go with Captain Jellicoe from Chain of Command, as played by the brilliant Ronnie Cox. Now, Captain Jellicoe was a pretty awesome captain. You know, everybody on the Enterprise was sort of acting like it was a Holiday Inn. No offense. But he came and he made things ship-shape. He put Troy in a uniform. He got her out of that stupid space cheerleader outfit. He told Riker to get it together, stop acting like such a wuss, you know, go get your own ship. He straightened out the Enterprise D. It would have been great if he stayed on board and Patrick Stewart could have gone back to doing Shakespeare. But Ronnie Cox, you know, came for 2 episodes, one of the most memorable Star Trek captains, one of the best episodes. I know everybody loves Inner Light with the flute and everything, but Chain of Command is a pretty damn good 2-parter. And Ronnie Cox as Captain Jellicoe was fantastic in both those episodes. Of course, he wasn't nearly as great as Captain Kirk, but you know what? I had to pick somebody.
All right, I want this one's. You guys gave some heated. I have a leading here, so I'm going to give you one more chance to. And it's really, I think you even called it yourself. It's really between Mark, Dan, and Brandon. I want to hear one more thought from you for this crowd. Listen to the argument: Kirk versus Picard. Go, Dan.
Okay, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that Captain Picard was a bad captain because he wasn't. It's just the world that you're in, and the Next Generation was great because it was more philosophical and it was much more about treaties and negotiating things, and that's great. Those are good skills to have. But when I think of a Starfleet captain, when I think of the captain of the Enterprise, I think of that kind of swagger that Captain Kirk had, the tactics that Captain Kirk had. He had to think outside the box. He had to invent solutions to problems that didn't even exist yet. And he was the first person to experience any of this stuff, so he didn't have that foreknowledge.
Captain Archer was, right, Brandon?
Yeah, well, Captain Archer would have. That might have been a good pick. He could have competed with me on Captain Archer. But I will say that the great thing about Starfleet and Starfleet's philosophy is going into the unknown, and that's why I think Kirk has the edge. Is that he had to go into the unknown. On a daily basis. That's what the Enterprise was there to do. It wasn't so much managing what we already knew. It was the great unknown of deep space, and that's why I love
Can I just
Captain
say,
Kirk.
Captain Kirk was JFK and Picard was George H.W. Bush. There's no comparison. Let me tell you something. And the other thing is, Captain Kirk is a man who had the respect of his crew, the loyalty of his friends, and a green girl on every planet. He wins, hands down. Captain
All
Kirk.
right.
That's
Brandon, you
it.
get the last word here to help. They've been crapping on your man there. Let's hear. What last thoughts?
I can't argue with anything you're saying, except to say that I take issue. I think Picard is a more enduring character. Now, granted, he had a lot more episodes, a lot more. And to say that Kirk was experiencing things first and Picard wasn't, you yourself just made the point that Picard went up against the Borg. I mean, Picard went up against plenty of excruciatingly difficult situations. I think I'm just a little more cerebral, and I prefer a captain like Picard could still be 80 and be a great captain. Kirk, man of action, not so much. In fact, when he was 44, he was worried about mortality.
It's true.
All right, guys, it's up to you. Sorry, you even said it yourself. You're out. Mark admitted
No,
it.
I was going to say, Brandon made a very compelling case for Picard.
He
That
did?
said, come on, really?
All right, don't tell the poll results yet.
I
'cause
won't,
wanna
but
see
I love
this.
that Jack Shipley says on Twitter, "This Star Trek movie fights has touched me in all my happy, nerdy places. This is truly a sci-fi nerd's dream." So people are absolutely loving this fight right now.
I'm
How
glad.
about a round of applause for these guys? That was a good fight.
Incredible.
All right, let's light up the room because I want to see how we're doing this. White
Right.
for Dan, black for Brett. So white for Kirk, black for Picard.
What about Jellicoe? Come
Oh,
on.
it's white.
Yeah, I see a lot of
Kirk
white.
gets the win.
So that means Brandon has 2 points, Dan 1 point. Sorry, Mark.
We have one.
tanking
So in
here.
this special episode, we have one
Tanking.
more round before we go to a quick speed round. Let's cue one more montage from your cast of Star Trek Beyond. Wait,
Film.
sorry.
Who would win in an actual? We've seen this on.
Pause it. I want to set this to. If you're stuck on an alien planet, which Star Trek bridge crew member would you pick to be stranded with? No captains. So we're asking the best crew member. Who's the best player you want on a desert island with you? Any show, any movie. Think about it while we watch this clip. Cue the clip again.
We've seen this on film. Who would win in an actual fight, Spock or Kirk?
Ooh.
Spock or Kirk?
Actual fight.
I mean, I'm going to say me, obviously, but
All
I'm
right.
assuming Zach's going to say Spock, so.
Spock's got the.
Spock, because he can do the Vulcan pinch.
Screen fight! Screen fight! It feels incredible. Zach.
What's at stake?
Let's say
in
it's
this-
over control of who's going to be the captain of the Enterprise.
Then I think Kirk would win.
Kirk wins.
Yeah, if it's to control the Enterprise.
What do you think is the better bromance? You two, Kirk and Spock, or Spock and Bones?
Right now, I'd say Spock and Bones, probably, unfortunately.
All right.
Kirk and Spock, Spock and Bones.
Ooh.
I gotta say Spones.
Bones. Yeah.
Who'd make the better captain of the Enterprise? Bones or Scotty?
I'd go for Scotty.
I would say Scotty. Yeah.
I was almost positive you'd say Bones.
But he knows his character well enough to not be egotistical about it. He's got a job that's more important than anyone's, and that's keeping us alive.
Who would make the better starship captain, Sulu or Uhura?
You are mischievous. Oh, that's so sinister.
On the one hand, Uhura can speak many languages, and there are people of various species on board, so you'd be a unifier.
On the other hand, we wouldn't be able to get anywhere if not for our
Without
pilot.
this guy.
I like to see Uhura be the captain. I like to see her take the helm. I think that would be cool. I think she actually would probably be. I mean, no offense to Sulu. I love Sulu, but I think Uhura actually would be able to listen and getting context before making the decision. I actually really like that idea.
Justin had an answer.
What was Justin's answer?
He said Uhura.
My Asian brother has let me down.
If you guys are going out for a night on the town, you can pick any of the bridge crew to be your wingman. Which one would you pick?
I'm gonna say Simon.
Yeah.
Like Kirk or Spock?
Spock.
That's a popular pick. A lot of people said Kirk, which I kind of disagree because I didn't think Kirk would.
Kirk or Crit?
Well,
Me.
Kirk, the character, the captain.
Oh, we're talking about.
Yeah,
we're talking about.
character-wise.
Oh.
Hypothetically, who do you choose?
Kirk.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, he gets the most.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
No, I was going to say he gets the most credit.
Yeah, he
for,
does.
He gets the most position.
He's got the most
He's got
swagger, the most
highest-
charisma.
I mean, basically, you work well off his runoff. What I'm saying.
I take Scotty.
Yeah?
Oh, Scotty would loosen every situation up. He sets it up nice.
Well, he's an engineer.
Yeah.
See, I agree with that because Kirk, you don't want to be your wingman because
No,
he's gonna
no.
just
He's
take
gonna
over.
he's gonna take away. Yeah.
Exactly. Spock, I think it might be a little too real.
Well, I'd take Sulu. Like Jake Sulu. Jake Sulu.
Other
Just do a
than
Sean Connery. Like Jake Sulu. Bashed.
Yeah, how about a round of applause for the cast of Star Trek Beyond? All right, guys. Mark, you picked first. Which crew member do you want to be on an island with? Again, no captains.
Okay, well, originally I was thinking Saavik, but then I realized when I was 10 years old I had a mad crush on Kirstie Alley, and it's really embarrassing, so I figured it can't be Saavik. And then I was thinking Scotty, in the Kelvin universe, could beam people from one planet to like another solar system, but I realized that was only in the Kelvin universe, you know, that in real Star Trek, you can't do that, so that wouldn't help me. So I decided I'd go with Jadzia Dax. And I'll tell you why. You know what I loved about Terry Farrell's performance, Jadzia Dax? She was really sarcastic. She was really smart. She was friends with everyone. She had a multiple personality disorder, which probably has something to do with the trill inside of her. She was just a fantastic character, and she hated technobabble. You know, Terry Farrell used to tell the writer, "Stop writing me technobabble, I can't say it." So that was another thing I loved about that character. I just thought that Dax was a great character. I think Deep Space Nine was a great show, and I feel it needs a little love here today because it's just not getting the love. So that would be my choice.
All right, Brandon, who are you picking?
Well, I would want to be stranded on a desert island where somebody's smarter than me, stronger than me, no emotional baggage, someone who's curious, loyal, ethical, someone who could live forever and loves cats. Data. That's all I have to say on the matter.
All right, we'll come back. Dan, who are you picking?
Well, you know, the question is who you want to be stranded on an isolated planet with. My number one priority when I'm thinking about who I want to be stranded on an isolated planet with is who can get me off the isolated planet that I'm currently stranded on. I almost said Scotty, but I got to go with the guy who I think has a little bit of an edge. I'm going Geordi LaForge, and here's why I'm going to say Geordi LaForge. Number one, he's the best engineer in Starfleet, and he has technological knowledge beyond Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott was an amazing, amazing, amazing engineer. But even in the episode Relics, we see that Geordi has kind of surpassed him. He has knowledge beyond what Mr. Scott has, so that's not his fault. That's just that Geordi knows more. Secondly, Geordi's got the visor or the implants or whatever, you know, version you want to go with. He's going to be able to see more. He's going to be able to see more on that planet. He's going to be able to see pockets. He's going to be able to see minerals, something that can send a signal, something that can get you help. That's what I want. I don't want to resign myself to being stranded on this planet forever.
Can we have
I want the guy who's
clarification?
going to get me off.
Is it an ice planet or a desert planet?
Alien planet.
That doesn't help.
I'm
You
going with
did
the guy
say-
that's going to get me off the
You
planet.
did say bridge crew, because Geordi's in the engineering.
Well, but he's got his station on the bridge. He's got a station on the bridge. He's a bridge officer. I will fight you.
Okay.
I know you worked on that show,
All
but
right.
I will
No,
fight you on that.
I don't remember. That's okay. Yeah, he's welcome on the bridge anytime.
All right, quickly, because I know you guys have some other commitments to do. We got to get this through. Quickly, thoughts on why the others aren't right. We'll start with you, Brandon.
Data can do everything Geordi can do and more. And Dax is great.
She blinded me with science.
Data's not the chief engineer. Geordi's the chief engineer. He can see more, and I think that he has more. One of the great things about having a human mind as opposed to Data, and you said with that emotional baggage, so I guess we're going with the emotionless Data, is that you have an intuition. And Geordi certainly had that. He certainly got himself out of many situations when the Enterprise was gone. He got himself off of a lot of isolated planets before. I'm going to go with the guy that I think could get me off that planet as well.
Mark?
Well, I think, again, you wouldn't be specific about the planet, whether it was an ice planet or a sand planet, so it makes it hard to really figure out who would be most useful. I mean,
You don't know what planet you're going to land on. Who do you want?
Oh, you mean if I know I'm going to crash?
You're going to crash on a planet, an isolated planet. You don't know what it is.
Do I have a shuttlecraft, or am I stranded because the transporter has malfunctioned?
There's a lot of variables, but which crew member are you going to want with you?
Well, apparently I said Dax, so I guess I'm sort of stuck with her, I guess. At worst things I can imagine. But but I got to say, Data is always malfunctioning. And, he got all these problems. He wants to be human. He can't really tell a joke well. I don't know. Brent,
you're giving up again and helping Dan?
For me, it's kind of like C-3PO and R2-D2. If you want the guy who's going to calculate the odds that I'm going to die, that's Data. If you want the guy that's C-3PO and Data, if you want the guy that's going to figure out how to get you out of the situation, that's Geordi, that's R2-D2.
I'm calling it. And I got to say, and it's not just because we're on time limit, I thought Dan crushed that, and when Mark sided with you, it helped. That makes it an even game. Dan and Brandon are going to a very quick speed round. How's that? Wow, that was a fight.
Oh,
all right.
I mentioned my book.
That was a great fight. Before we get to the speed round, I just want to take a moment to thank all our Plus members.
Yes,
because of
thank
them,
you.
we're able to do this amazing thing. If you want to join and see nearly 20 original weekly shows, hours of live content, join right now at ScreenJunkies.com/plus, and you can use the offer code SJCentral16. You'll get 50% off the annual membership.
It's
amazing.
a steal. TV Fights is there, guys. Every week, we got to get you guys back on TV Fights.
Yes.
You would crush it. All right, speed round. We're going to have 3 quick speed round here.
I'll
the way
time
this
it.
works is you'll have 15 seconds to answer quickly, Brandon and Dan. I'm going to ask you a question. You have to say your answer quickly. If you say the same answer at the same time, it's whoever said it first gets it. You'll have to pick something else. Make sense?
So we're answering at the same time.
You and Dan are going to be answering at the same time. So as soon as I ask the question, answer quickly. If you say the same thing, we'll hear who said it first. And then you'll have 15 seconds to argue and then 10-second rebuttals.
You have to answer, it's not like a quiz. You have to answer like out loud. Be like, oh, I think
Got
it's,
it.
yeah.
Is there a buzzer?
No.
The buzzer is me going,
She'll
ding.
be dinging you. Of all the TV series, what's the best Star Trek episode?
All Good Things, Next Generation.
Yesterday's Enterprise, also Next Generation.
Ooh, okay.
Now he
All
likes
good-
something he wrote finally. Thank God.
All right,
co-wrote
Brandon, you have
it.
15 seconds when you start talking. Go ahead. Why is All Good Things better than Yesterday's Enterprise?
Because it's a 2-hour episode. It's more all-encompassing. It hits every character. It's a character-rich episode. Yesterday's Enterprise is cool, but All Good Things was one of the, I think, just a great finale for that TV show.
Ding.
Ding, you'll have 10 more seconds. Dan, you have 15 seconds. Go.
All Good Things was like a really amazing goodbye to an old friend. I think that Yesterday's Enterprise stands in the Trek because it's got like the Trinity, it's got time travel, it's got alternate universes. You bring back Tasha Yar. You get to see what happened to the Enterprise B, or the Enterprise C, which is like a big.
10 seconds, Brandon.
All Good Things had time travel, but it took place, and Tasha Yar, and it took place in 3 time periods, not 2. It was a more ambitious episode.
We're not having a time period competition here. I just think that Yesterday's Enterprise is a better sci-fi episode and a better Star Trek episode. All Good Things is a good episode, but it's sentimental. It's not so much pushing the boundaries of sci-fi, which is what I love in Star Trek.
Oh, good. All right. Lift those lights up for me. Black for Dan, white for Brandon. Oh, man.
Oh, yeah.
That's
blood
white. Brandon gets the first point. Okay.
Woo-hoo. 3
I
to
love
2.
All Good Things, by the way.
Nobody asked me, but I would have said City and Angela Forever.
All right, here we
that's a good
go.
one. I should've
Answer
thought of
quickly. Ready? Which piece of Star Trek tech do you most wish was real?
Holodeck.
Brandon, he picked the holodeck.
Yeah, I would have picked the holodeck, but But I'm gonna go fundamental, warp drive.
Ooh. See? All right, Dan, you're up first. 15 seconds.
The great thing about the holodeck is you're on a long space voyage. You need something to entertain you, and the holodeck, you can go anywhere, you can go anytime, you can go any place, you can be anybody. It's the greatest recreational tool ever made. It's not just confined to space travel. It can be on your home planet. It can be used for anything.
Ding.
You're right. The holodeck can take you anywhere. Fake. Warp drive takes you anywhere for real, and it was the single most important invention of Star Trek. Transporter, awesome. Holodeck,
Ding.
awesome.
10 seconds, Dan, when you start talking.
Again, the warp drive is great for people that want to be space explorers, but not everybody wants to be a space explorer. The holodeck is something that everyone can enjoy. It's something that anyone in Ivy civilization can enjoy. It's not just a tool for explorers, it's a tool for everyone.
Last 10 seconds for Brennan.
We're having a Star Trek debate, not your personal, recreational, and I think that warp drive is more important.
Get out of your parents' basement.
All right. White for
Do
Dan.
we need to?
White, what?
Do we need to?
You got your time, didn't you?
No, I mean, do we need to do this?
Oh. Yes, you know.
Go ahead.
Dan still has a shot, guys. White for the holodeck, black for warp drive. Oh, sorry, Dan.
Yes.
That means Brandon wins! Win our first ever Star Trek movie fights. That was an amazing honor. Did you have fun?
I had a blast. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
I feel bad for the Silicon Rock creature.
All right, guys, I want to thank our sponsor, T-Mobile, for bringing this to us again. Double the LT coverage. You can follow the fights in more places, so please, thanks to T-Mobile. Thanks for doing that. I want to thank each of our fighters. Dan Merle, you can see him all the time, but this was a dream come true, right?
I got schooled by people that know vastly more about Star Trek than I do, so yes, that was fully expected. Absolutely.
Yes, he did. Round of applause, yeah, for each of these players. Mark Altman, tell us where the 50-year mission, where can they find this amazing book of yours?
It's on sale now. It's 50 years of Star Trek. The first one's 25 years. It's an oral history of Star Trek. Brandon is one of the over 500 people we interviewed. It's the definitive history, uncensored, the true story. It's like being at the coolest dinner party of all time. Dan's not there, so it's even better. And I'm kidding. And it's on sale now at bookstores. You know the big buildings that have books in them?
Yes, they still exist.
And or online at any of your favorite online retailers.
Brandon, any plugs you'd like to offer, anything else you're working on to tell the audience about?
Oh, yeah. I have the third season of my show, Salem, premieres Halloween week. So please check it out.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank them so much. Round of applause. Thank you, too. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks again to sponsor T-Mobile. With double the LTE coverage, get your Screen Junkies fix in more places. To watch our previous show, click to the left. And to view everything else from Screen Junkies.